I am Emma Smith, and I am 41 years old. I work as a teacher in Georgia. The story I'm about to tell you is about a time when I almost died, and Jesus showed me the shocking truth about where Black people really came from. Seeing and experiencing something totally changed how I think about Black people, their history, and how they are connected to God. But first, let me know where you are listening. Even though we're not together, it will be nice to feel closer. Don't forget to mark this story as liked and share your thoughts on what you thought about it. Let's talk about this in an honest way so we can all learn from each other. Have fun listening. It took place on August 5th, 2021. My health had been giving me trouble for months, leaving me tired, worn out, and in pain for no clear reason. My doctors didn't know what was wrong, but things really heated up that night. I was in the living room with my husband talking about the kids' homework, when all of a sudden, the lights went out. What happened after that is hard to explain. I went from being in my house to being outside of it in a flash. I felt like I wasn't in my body anymore. I was light and airy. I found myself in a vast lit space. It seemed like the air itself was bright, warm, and full of light, and Jesus was right there in front of me. He was dressed in bright white clothes, and his eyes looked right into my heart. At the same time, I felt love, warmth, and care. It felt like all the fear I had ever felt washed away. What I knew at that moment was that I was with someone who knew everything. At first, Jesus didn't say anything, but then he spoke softly. "Welcome, Emma. You're here for a reason." As I stood there in front of him, I had a lot of questions, but before I could say anything, Jesus spoke. He began to explain things that would totally change how I saw the world and everything in it. The curse of Ham was one of the first things he told me. The story was old news to me. Who hadn't? I learned in church as a child that Black people were cursed because of Ham, Noah's son. A lot of people seem to understand this idea, which is often used to talk about racism, slavery, and discrimination. Christ told me this was all wrong though. Emma, people have been wrong about the curse of Ham for hundreds of years. He said that Black people were never supposed to be cursed. As I tried to understand what he said, I was shocked. He told them that the curse wasn't on Ham, but on Canaan, Ham's son. Genesis 9:18-29 of the Bible talk about how Noah got drunk and showed his kids his private parts. Noah cursed Canaan, Ham's son, instead of Ham, when Ham saw his father in that state and didn't cover him. Then I understood that the curse on Canaan is a metaphor for the message from the prophets about Canaan's heirs and the problems that would arise. This completely changed how I understood, and as Jesus spoke, I felt a huge sense of certainty. Canaan was the only person the threat was aimed at, not all of Ham's family. Canaan and his children and grandchildren were cursed, not Black people. For some reason though, the truth has been twisted over time, and people have used this to support their own harmful beliefs and biases. Jesus told me that the curse wasn't based on race, but on sin and spiritual failure. It wasn't about skin color, it was about sin. It took hundreds of years of abuse and discrimination, but Jesus showed me that this distortion had become deeply rooted in society over time. People got the word wrong, and that mistake hurt many generations of people in terrible ways. Jesus told me the truth about where Black people came from as we walked through that beautiful place together. Like a lot of other people, I had always thought that Black people were less important or had been cursed in some way, but Jesus showed that the African ancestry was a blessing from God. Emma, he told her, you have thought a lot of false things about Africans. I will show you the truth. For hundreds of years, the Black people who are descended from Ham have had their story twisted so that no one can understand it. It was never about a curse. It was always about a plan and a gift from God. He taught me about the importance of Ham's children, especially Cush, Mizraim, and Put. He said that Cush was the father of the older African groups that created the Great Kingdom of Cush, which was one of the great civilizations of history, along with Egypt. Christ smiled. Their past isn't one of shame. It's one of honor and strength. That part where Jesus said that the name Cush itself meant black in the Bible really hit me. He said that being called black was never a sign of shame. In the past, it stood for beauty, strength, and the power of a group of people. He took a moment to think about what he had said. It has been said wrongly over the years, but being black was not a sin. It was a blessed and holy identity. I learned through Jesus that Cush's children and grandchildren were very important to God's plan for people. He said that God had given these people wisdom, guidance, and his favor. Ethiopia, Cush, Nubia, and Egypt were not cursed. In the ancient world, they were picked by God to do something greater. One of the most important things Jesus told me was about Egypt in the past. Egypt's past and mysteries have always interested me. I've been interested in the tombs, the gods and goddesses, and the amazing things the ancient Egyptians did since I was a child. But I had never thought about the greater divine link between Egypt and the story of creation and God's first people. Christ told Emma that Egypt was never just a place where people were forced to work. It is the birthplace of culture and a place where the world can learn and feel wise. Jesus said that Mizraim, who was one of Ham's sons, was the Egyptians' father. He went on to say that the Egyptians were from the same lucky family as Cush. They were special people who were given a lot of knowledge and wisdom, which was then shared with other cultures around the world. He told them that Egypt was more than just a place to be slaves. There was divine wisdom there, and people were meant to share what they learned. The great spiritual leaders, the pharaohs, taught us a lot. It was part of my plan to change the world. Jesus felt sorry for me as he looked at me. Seeing how Egypt kept the Israelites as slaves makes me understand the pain you've been through. But the Egyptians were once chosen by God to bring wisdom and light to all countries, even though they turned to worshipping false gods. As I stood there with Jesus and took in everything he was showing me, my soul went through a deep change. I didn't know where I fit in the world and felt detached my whole life. But Jesus showed me a new truth, one that had a divine history that went back to the start of time. He then talked about how decades of pain, discrimination, and hurt had been caused by wrong readings of the Bible and twisting of facts about race and identity. But now is the time to heal, he said. Now is the time for truth. There was no such thing as a curse on Ham. People had a spiritual misunderstanding that has been used to hurt, change, and hide the beauty of Black people's history. The deep peace and clarity I felt as Jesus continued to lead me through that bright space were unlike anything I had ever felt on earth. The truth healed the hurts of my past like a balm. He had already told me the truth about the curse of Ham and how it had been twisted over the years to keep people from loving each other and being kind. But there was still more to find out, and Jesus, ever patient, started to take me deeper into the secrets of where Black people came from spiritually. He told Emma that there was more to the story, to see the strength, knowledge, and love that my people have passed down through the years. Please look at this. At that time, he showed a huge map of civilizations, including Ethiopia, Nubia, Cush, Egypt, and others, all of which were descended from Cush. Jesus said that these countries were very important to God's plan for people. They were very important in making the world what it is today, long before it became confusing and divided. I saw the old country of Cush, which grew and thrived along the Nile. The people of Cush were not only strong in war, but also spiritually wise. Jesus told them that they were guardians of holy information. Their knowledge of how the world was made and the divine rules that govern it came from God and was meant to shine light on the hearts of all people. I saw artifacts, old temples, and writings that talked about a close and personal relationship with God that many people today have no idea about. The great Nubian queens, like Queen Amenirines and Queen Makeda, who led their people with beauty, courage, and strength, moved me deeply. He said that these women were spiritual leaders as well as political leaders. It was clear to them that God had called them to lead their people with love and knowledge. I loved them very much. Additionally, the kingdom of Egypt was proof of God's gift. Jesus showed me that the Egyptians had been on the cutting edge of spiritual and intellectual progress, even though they later turned to worshipping false gods. He said Egypt was a place where wise people were born. The place was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a place where divine knowledge grew. They showed me that Moses, the great prophet, was born in Pharaoh's house on purpose, not by chance. Jesus said that the Egyptians were very wise, which is why Moses was sent to Egypt. He was told to lead my people away, but Egypt was meant to be a light and a refuge for knowledge that many other countries could learn from. Jesus told them that what we call worship in Egypt was once a part of their spiritual path. They tried to figure out what God was like, but they got lost. Still, they were wise because they knew what was true. I started to see how people who came from Africa lived all over the world. The African Exodus, which includes the forced migration of millions of Africans as slaves, was not a mistake. It was part of God's bigger plan. I saw how my African ancestors had taken their knowledge, faith, and strength around the world, even when they were going through terrible pain. Jesus taught me that slavery, which was one of the worst parts of human history, wasn't something God ordered. Instead, it was caused by sin and greed on the part of people. Even though they were in a lot of pain, the African people had a divine spark that gave them hope, faith, and power that could never go out. This divine strength had been around for generations of pain, and it was this strength that made the Black community so strong. Emma, Africans are not just being able to stay alive. They are my soldiers, my children, and they carry a divine tradition that has been passed down for thousands of years. Jesus spoke these words with such power that I could feel them in my heart. As I thought about what he said, I saw Black spiritual leaders who had been moved by this holy spark. From abolitionists to Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders, these people were not only fighting for freedom, but also for fairness that was in line with God's will. I saw that God had always been with the African people, even when things were the worst. He had sent prophets, leaders, and campaigners to speak for him and lead his people to a better future. Then Jesus helped me understand the soul of Africa. It's always interested me what my ancestors did spiritually, like the traditions they did, how they respected their ancestors, and how they were connected to the earth and nature. Jesus told me that these practices, as long as they were done in a clean way, were not against God. Instead, they showed how deeply connected the African people were spiritually to God. Emma, your predecessors knew they were linked to everything in the world, from the earth to the stars. They knew that everything has God in it, and that everything can be used to serve God. To respect ancestors in many African cultures wasn't about worshipping the dead. Jesus showed me it was about recognizing the wisdom and sacrifices of those who had come before. He said that honoring your ancestors doesn't mean worshipping them, but understanding their role in the story of God, keeping in touch with the love and knowledge that has been passed down through generations. I saw pictures of old African ceremonies where people danced, sang, and talked to God through fire, water, air, and earth. Folks believed that God was present everywhere, not just in buildings and books. This is where the traditions got their start. Christ said, "I am in all things. Being with me is like the ground, the wind, the water, and the fire." You can see that the practices showed how deeply connected the Creator was to His work. That's when I realized that spirituality wasn't just found in one society or religion, but in everyone. It could look different, but it always came from the same divine source. As my journey with Jesus went on, He started to tell me about the hard times that African Americans and African Americans had been through in the past. I understood that the fight for freedom, equality, and justice wasn't just about people working together. It had a deep connection to a spiritual plan that God had talked about and planned ahead of time. Emma, Jesus told her that the Black community's fight is not just for rights, but for spiritual liberty as well. It is a fight to bring divine truth and fairness back to the world. The fight they are having is for the honor, dignity, and place that has always been theirs in my country. I love them, and I have heard their cries. This new information was very strong. It meant that the suffering, pain, and abuse that Black people went through were not in vain. They were fighting for truth and justice in a bigger cosmic battle. It was more than just a political or social movement for African Americans to fight for freedom. It was a spiritual call. God saw how unfair things were and was using this group to make the world a better place. It was shown to me that the strength of the Black society, from the slaves in Africa to the civil rights movements, was a sign of God's plan. These hard times were painful, but they were part of God's plan to bring truth, love, and togetherness back to the world. I began to understand what part the African people played in God's plan to save the world. Jesus said that the problems Black people were having were proof to the world that the holy spark inside them had never gone out, even when things were very bad. Emma, the return of my people, my children, will happen during a time of great awakening. The world will learn the truth about who they are and what they're here to do, and there will be a time of healing and togetherness. I had a vision of Jesus coming back to bring justice, peace, and healing to everyone, but especially to the Black community. The truth about how they came from God would no longer be kept secret. The gift that had been missed for so long would finally be seen by everyone. While I was coming back to my body on earth, I felt very grateful and at peace. Black people's divine lineage wasn't something to be ashamed of or hide. This gift was holy and had been passed down from generation to generation. It would always shine as a sign of hope, power, and divine purpose. I was different when I finally woke up in the hospital. The doctors told me I had been dead for more than 12 minutes, but I knew I had seen or heard something that science alone could never explain. I had seen God's plan come together in front of my eyes. But most of all, I had seen the love and kindness of Jesus, who had shown me the true and holy part that Black people play in God's story. People who are watching, I want you to know that what I went through was for all of us. I learned the truth. Black people are not cursed. They are spiritually chosen and have a long history of being strong, wise, and having a purpose. Our problems are a part of a bigger spiritual fight, but things will get better and heal in the end. Know this: if you are Black, you are a part of something bigger. You are strong, loved, and picked. The lesson of healing and unity is also for people from other backgrounds. To fix the world, We need to understand and love each other. Hey,